Hey everyone, welcome to another GoDaddy Pro meetup. My name is Marcus Burnett, and I am part of the GoDaddy Pro team. Today I have some really smart people joining me to talk about some ways that you can create additional offerings to grow your web services business. But before I introduce them, I do want to let you know that I will be monitoring the chat for those of us that are joining us here at the event. And if you have any questions throughout, please do toss them in the chat, and I'll be hanging out in there as well and make sure that we surface any of those as we go along. Also, this is being recorded, and a replay link will be sent out as soon as this is available on the GoDaddy Pro YouTube channel. So if you need to leave early or want to share this with your team afterward, then you'll have a link to that. So without further ado, hopefully Michelle joins us back up, but I will go ahead and start with a couple of introductions here. First up, we have, well, there's Michelle. Just in time. I was going to introduce her first. You there, Michelle?
Yes, for some reason my video's not wanting to work.
Uh-oh. Try maybe toggling the little arrow thing. That's what I had wrong before. It like picked up something else.
It's showing the right one.
Dang technology.
All right. Well, I will let Michelle look at that. You were just here a moment ago. I know it's possible. Well, let's go ahead and just start with a couple of introductions while Michelle takes a look at her video settings there. So first up, we have Topher DeRoja, who is the Senior WordPress Architect at Camber Creative, curator of the Hero Press Network, serial teacher, and fellow WordPress photo directory moderator. How are you doing today, Topher?
Doing really well. It's a good day.
Yeah, you were just mentioning right before this, you had a Twitter takeover, and you're still in the middle of that, or that's finished up?
No, it's done. It's done.
Double duty. Awesome. Next, we also have Alicia Leno, who's the Senior Director of Content at GoDaddy, formerly a marketing manager for Securi, and manages the GoDaddy Pro content team. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Marcus.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. We also have Maddie Osman, founder of The Blogsmith, an SEO content writing agency for B2B technology brands. Also has spoken at WordCamp US and helps organize WordCamp Denver. Welcome to the panel, Maddie.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Michelle Butcher-Jones, who I will introduce should she return to us here. So
here she is.
She's popping in and out.
I mean, great.
Well, not letting me, I don't know, understand this because you were able to see me earlier.
Yeah, interesting.
Second time I've had like something go wrong with like Zoom settings. I wonder if like Mercury's in retrograde or something. Just try turning it off and on again. I don't know what else to do.
Right. Reset your router.
Yeah.
Let me try something. I will toss prisoner mode off and back on and see if that helps. Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
I can unmute, but I cannot start video.
We're mystery woman today.
Right.
Yeah.
For those of you listening along.
Yeah. Michelle, do you want me to go ahead and introduce you so people can put that avatar to the rest of the details? All right. And we also have Michelle Butcher-Jones, who hopefully we'll be able to see here shortly, but is the lead WordPress technical specialist at Thrive Internet Marketing Agency, runs her own WordPress shop at 13 Core, and organizes a couple of WordCamps and WordPress meetups. How are you today, Michelle?
I am great, especially if I can get my camera working. But for
Great,
some
just
reason,
sitting
it was
in a dark
working
room.
2 seconds ago.
You never know what causes these things. Different every time.
Technology. I don't see anything else I can do from my end, so I don't know if I can try unplugging and plugging the camera. Hey, we have video.
Don't touch anything.
I unplugged it and I plugged it back in.
Nice. Oldest trick in the book. Works every time. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have your face joining us and not just your voice. Thank you for being here, Michelle. You all come into this panel with different specialties, though no doubt a number of overlapping skills. Before we talk about any particular services that a pro, in this case, agency or freelancer business might consider offering, I want to just ask the question, why? Why would they want to add more services to their offerings? Is it as simple as just increasing revenue, or is there more to it than that? If anybody wants to start off.
I think from
I
my
have kind of
perspective. Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Go ahead. The easy answer is for me on that one is the more you do maintenance and security and support, the less in a way you'll have to do later.
That's a good point.
Going to just chime basically the same thing. Coming from a security background, wanting to make sure your clients are secured saves you from those late night phone calls, or having an issue that you don't want to deal with and have to drop everything. Frustrated client. And from the marketing side, why do people have a website in the first place? Understanding what their motivations are, how they're going to, get leads or get bookings or whatever is important to them is going to make you more successful as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the idea of diversification, and maybe even beyond services, thinking of other revenue streams that can complement your business, and perhaps even like building those off of like your own internal processes that you then share because you've figured them out and you do a great job and you're not worried about how sharing those things is going to affect your core business. So yeah, for me, it's like investments. It's the idea of not leaning into any one thing, but having like a lot of things hats spinning in the air or whatever.
For me, it's a lot about the kind of relationship you want to have with your clients. What is your business? Is your business building websites or doing security, or is your business helping people solve problems that they have, providing them with solutions? And if you're in the business of providing solutions, then you're going to see a need, or you might ask them or whatever. And if it looks like you can help them with that need, then that's a great time to start adding that.
Yeah.
Awesome. That makes sense. Last month, we had a New Year's coffee chat similar to this one with some different folks and talked about just sort of getting started with some services, keeping sites up to date and that sort of thing, general maintenance thing for websites and service agreements. I know that, Michelle, you were wanting to talk a bit about maintenance and service agreements. What sort of things do you all offer at Thrive or at 13 Core? And maybe talk to us a little bit about why maintenance agreements in general are a good idea, as opposed to maybe building a site and then moving on to the next client, moving on to the next customer.
On the money thing, it's kind of residual income. And then also for being a full stack, if you build it and then later you maintain it, you and your team write the code and then essentially later update and fix the code, and it makes it a lot easier for not having to learn how and why someone else might have written something. And for on the client, it's a lot cheaper to pay, like say $75 a month for hosting and monthly updates than it would be to just let it go, and then a year from now you can't figure out why your site is going to like a Viagra site or something like that, and you have to pay to get this server clean, get the site back online, and then get everything updated, where that could cost a lot of places around like $400 and up to clean a basic site, where you would have just spent about the same for a year and never had that issue, and also lose the money and the leads that you could have had while your site was down.
Yeah. Do you generally recommend going with like a monthly agreement or a yearly thing? How do you determine, I assume, let's just say for this example that you've built a website, you've built a relationship with the client, so they're going to want to stick with you for this part for, ongoing maintenance. Do you have a time where you say, let's revisit in 6 months whether this is, beneficial to either of us? Do you go for a year-long contract or take it month to month? How do you sort of
Usually
that?
do month to month, just because, like, say if they do decide to go with an all-in-one company that does like digital marketing and hosting and stuff like that, it's easier to move than to have it locked in. Say, like, if you do for a whole year and then your company gets bought out or something like that, and you end up losing the money in the long run. I've always liked doing the more month to month to make it easier on both sides. And then just say you give at least a 20 to 30 day notification if you decide to leave.
Awesome. How about the other three of you? Have you had any experience with sort of just ongoing maintenance agreements, maybe specifically right now in this case to ongoing updates to the sites, just keeping things, running smoothly and keeping, quote unquote, the bad guys out and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Camber, where I worked, is mostly an enterprise level company. And so, we're not charging $75 a month to maintain somebody's plugins and things like that. But we do some of the weirder maintenance kind of things. Like we did have one site that was on WordPress, but they were extremely security conscious and they had plugin updates turned off, and everything is in GitHub. And so to update things, I'd log in via SSH and use WP CLI to do the updates, and then push to GitHub, and then they used a GitHub I don't remember what they're called, action, to copy it from dev to testing, where we would test and then push to a different branch and it would go to live and all that kind of stuff, which is not something your typical WordPresser is going to do, not something the services are going to want to get into, although they might, it depends on the scale. But that's the kind of stuff we do. And it is more expensive than a typical WordPress maintenance package, but it's weird work. It's different, it's non-standard. So we have found it to be useful in providing it as a solution. Like we don't have a package. We don't say this is our maintenance package, sign up here. But if we were looking at a client and we can tell they need it, or if they ask for it, then we discuss it and we work something out.
Yeah, Alicia, with your Sakuri experience and managing things there, how important is it for plugins to be kept updated and there to be an ongoing security check system in place on a monthly basis?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's super important. We put out a annual hacked website report. Actually, our new one is coming out soon for Sakuri, and we'll be mentioning it on the GoDaddy Pro blog as well. But it's always plugin updates. It's not like Core that's the issue, right? Core has tons of contributors reviewing the code and making sure it's secure and tight. But it's part of the benefit of WordPress is the fact that it's very extensible. But in those extensions, you have a lot less reviewers of the plugins code. So there's a lot of opportunities for an attacker to get in there. And it's not the plugin developer's fault. It happens. Vulnerabilities happen. We always would say at Sakuri, the risk is never zero. And so with as many plugins as there are there, it's very likely that you're going to encounter a vulnerability at some time. And making sure that you have updates enabled automatically ensures that you're getting those security patches as fast as possible. But obviously, as Topher mentioned, it's not always realistic. Some site owners don't want automatic updates. They're worried about functionality breaking, especially if there's custom code. So they need to have a process, and they need somebody who can work in to what works for them and make sure that they're responsive. So that's a great maintenance package to offer if you have something custom that you can do with your client. And security is something that everybody needs, and it's top of mind for clients and for web professionals as well.
Yeah. When Michelle was talking about this earlier, it sounded like maybe she's seen some things. Does anybody have any horror stories they want to share?
I actually had a site where a woman was like, I don't know what's wrong with my site. And I was like, well, when's the last time you logged into it? Oh, about a year ago. and her server had over 120 gigabytes of torrent files on it.
Oh wow.
Oh no.
Someone had used it as a torrent server. There was like just hundreds and hundreds of movie files on it.
Oh no.
Wow.
That's bad for several reasons. Not just the site's vulnerability, but you know, the legal implications of having all of that content on there.
Well, can you imagine if they're paying for bandwidths too, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
you would know pretty quick.
I could speak to something that happened to my website when it got a malware attack. And I use like, you know, different security plugins. I have a WordPress maintenance company that I work with, but something happened where I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was manipulating the indexing of the website so that it had all these like junk URLs and like junk files that we're adding to like the total index pages that come up on Google in relation to our domain. And I've just got to say that cleaning that up was such a headache. I mean, I had to pay a company to clean it up and then do like ongoing work to disavow links and, you know, like try to scrub it basically.
You know, with your background in SEO and everything, you know the implications of that, and like it's a lot. But yeah, I used to
this for a while. I mean, it just killed organic traffic until we fixed it.
Yeah.
A bunch of years ago, a site that I was in charge of, there was a previously unknown security flaw in the SSH server in Red Hat. And basically, it allowed them to replace the SSH binary with their own, which looked just like the regular one. But what it did was really impressive. It logged the IP addresses of people logging in via SSH and never served malware to them. So I never saw it. Nobody on our team ever saw it. None of the people that we hired
data
ever saw it. And furthermore, it was getting cached by Cloudflare. And so in some circumstances, we could see it because we were getting the Cloudflare cache, which made us think it was coming from Cloudflare. And it was horrible. It was security that figured it out. And I think they were the ones to disclose the security flaw in SSHD to Red Hat. So we were really early. It caused a lot of trouble. It was in the news. This was 2012. It was in the news for a while that this thing was out there. But wow, that was weeks we were struggling with this, knowing we were serving malware and not being able to do anything about it. It was really painful.
brutal. It can be really rough because you know the malware is only specifically showing to people coming from Google or a specific country, and I mean it's always a cat and mouse game between security researchers and the attackers to try and figure out, like, you know, how can we obfuscate ourselves and how can we not get caught? What can we do to better analyze and, you know, report and check on attacks? So,
right.
Yeah, we had a site like that at the agency that I worked at a few years ago. And yeah, our client emailed us and was like, hey, we're getting redirected to whatever when we go to this page. And we're like, fine, let's take a look and see what's going on. We go there and it would be working just fine. And it's that conditional part. We're like, I don't even know how to track down what might be happening because it's not happening to me. So no matter what I do, I'm not going to know if I fixed it or not. So there's, you know, a bunch of back and forth we had to do, you know, scanning the code and hoping for the best, hoping we find whatever was going on. But yeah, again, like you said before, core is usually not the issue. It's usually plugins, and sometimes really hard, depending on where the plugins came from, to validate, you know, where the issue is, which one has a file that's not quite exactly what it's supposed to be, what it was when you downloaded it. And,
right,
you know, making those comparisons can be tough with, you know, third-party plugins and everything.
And then what's also fun with that is when you use the themes that have different types of plugins baked into it, like back in 2017 when RevSlider had their huge vulnerability. There were so many people who was using different Envato type themes that had the baked in plugins like Layer Slider, Rev Slider, and stuff like that, that they had no idea it was even in there. And it needed to be updated. So they were getting hacked and not knowing what was going on. There was just thousands and thousands of sites like that.
Yeah.
It was like 100,000 in a weekend, I remember, because I had just joined like a few months ago, and we were at a leadership retreat, and nobody ended up doing anything during leadership retreat except for cleaning hack sites. Like we all just sat there in the boardroom, like dealing with that.
I made a decent amount of money during that time. Of just like I have a site hack I'm using. I hate to say it, but one of the biggest ones was a Veda. And the Veda theme, and I'm like, just send it over here, done.
Yeah. It's funny the way we remember these stories, the way people talk about storms. Remember the snowstorm of 76? Yeah, I remember the Rev Slider one. 17.
It was kind of a storm, just a different type.
Yeah.
Yeah, who doesn't love setting aside an entire day for a team to deal with an issue that wasn't caused by someone on the team, right? Danielle in the chat says, I get so scared with having way too many plugins, which, falls in line here of having to figure out where issues might be coming from. Do you all have any suggestions for weeding out plugins that are on the website that are dormant, or I guess figuring out which plugins you don't need, which plugins are there, and what to do with plugins that are inactive? Just any advice around keeping plugin installs to a minimum?
It's definitely a good idea. Get rid of plugins. I could just say that. And I would say a staging site, turn them off, see what happens. I mean, I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, that's a good way to go. I have spent, I run HeroPress, which has probably 60 plugins on it. And I wrote 30 of them. But that site's been up 7 years. So a couple of times in the last 7 years, I've gone through and read the description of every single plugin. What is this doing? Why is this here? What was I thinking in 2016 when I installed this? And do I still need it? And so it can be worthwhile. It might take some time if you have a lot, but it's worth it. And there's some that maybe you are using, but maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you don't want this functionality anymore. Maybe, that you don't need the icon for Google Social Network that I don't even remember the name of anymore.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that?
Also,
Circles or something?
Google
Plus had Circles.
Google Plus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Using a product like the Managed WP that GoDaddy has, with the plugins, you can click on them and it will kind of show if the plugin is still being supported. And if the plugin's on your site and say it's not been updated in the past 4 major releases, and it has that little tag on it that says you might want to look into this. It's always good about at least once a year to look over what plugins you're using. Are they still supported? Is there something out there that does it better, coded better, supported better, and then didn't switch it out with ones that can be more progressive?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, Danielle followed up in the chat saying that she does use that part of Managed WP. Good reminder that that's there. A couple of questions, I guess. One is that there's the unsupported message, but then there's also, .org has the, this hasn't been updated in however long. Is that maybe a red flag sometimes? Should you weed them out based on that? And then I guess to wrap this back into what we've been talking about, is that plugin audit something that you would offer within a maintenance plan? Is that something that you do on a yearly basis as part of that? Is that a separate thing?
We tend to glance over them once a quarter when we're doing a just full complete upgrade of everything and doing kind of a look at their plugins, because it kind of makes it easier, because then in your head you can be like, I've not seen an update for this one in a while. Let me look into it. But if a plugin hasn't been updated in a while, Like there's the theme checker that Otto built. I know that one, he's
Right.
not updated it in a long time, but it's still a relevant plugin and he still supports it. So I would say look at when was the last time it had been updated, and then also if it's still supported.
Yeah. I have probably 9 plugins on the WordPress repo, and I don't think any of them have been updated in 3 or 4 years. But they all work great, and there aren't any security holes. It's just I'm too lazy to go in and bump the version number, you know.
Yeah, and it's definitely not important to, you know, like so like you said, some plugins, the functionality is maybe very small and doesn't need to be constantly updated. I would say too, I look at the support forums on WordPress.org for the plugins.
Yeah.
If there's people putting in a bunch of support requests in the forum and nobody's responding, that's a little bit of a red flag to me. I'd want to know that they're actively, you know, listening to users' feedback, and you know, if there is something that's reported to them, they're going to act on it quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, probably complexity of the plugin factors in there as well. You know, if it's a shopping cart system that hasn't been updated in 4 years, maybe that's one to stay away
That's an
from.
issue.
But if it's something that does, you know, one simple task and does it well, and whatever it does hasn't been changed in core for years, so there's no reason for the plugin to change, then that might be still fine. We've talked quite a bit about some maintenance stuff and security things, and that all makes sense. Maybe let's move on to a category or a couple of categories that people may not think about as much in terms of ongoing maintenance. Let's start with content with Alicia, and you can tell us a little bit about like ongoing content things, and then I'll throw it over to you, Maddie, to talk about some SEO things after that.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that I find when I work with folks is that they want constant content updates to their site. You know, they may be changing things, they may be testing something, they want a new landing page, they're testing with an ad campaign. I think those kinds of things, if you can get in front of clients, even if they have a site that maybe you don't think needs updates often, letting them know that there's opportunities to personalize their content for specific audiences, to create those landing pages that maybe aren't part of the navigation or linked directly on the site, but you can use them in specific campaigns, social, paid advertising, that kind of thing. I think that's a great opportunity to stay close to the client and make sure that you can have an ongoing package. Maybe it's not necessarily maintenance. I'm not a great developer or anything like that. So for me, it's more about providing them with the value that they're looking for in terms of increasing their audience, and, you know, getting more customers.
Yeah, when we talk about sort of ongoing content agreements, what does that usually look like, do you think? Or maybe it depends on the business itself, but is that blog articles? Is that social content? Is that part of it as well? How much of that is written by you as an agency versus you're sort of there to strategize with them and have them write their own content, or does it vary?
It totally varies. It really depends on the level of the client and their ability to write something on their own. I have people I work with who they definitely want to write everything, and I might give it a proofread and post it to them because they really just don't want to touch the site. They don't like technology, but they're great writers. I have other folks who, you know, have, you know, I've done all the content for them, and they've looked it over and, you know, made sure that it's in their voice and their brand and everything like that. I've also had clients where I've done everything from the ground up in terms of helping them decide what their brand is and trying to develop the identity for them and tone of voice and that kind of thing. But it can vary between content marketing, which Maddie can talk about more when we chat more about SEO. She's awesome. We've worked with her on the GoDaddy blog as well. Her process is amazing. But yeah, advertising as well, I think, is really important for a lot of small businesses. And so being able to help them out and think about how to target things, you know, from an SEO standpoint, and also just with the targeting options available on social platforms for ads. It's always changing. I mean, I've never run a TikTok ad, but I'm very curious. I would like to know like what the targeting options are, because it might be really appropriate for some businesses. I work with somebody who's a personal trainer, and, you know, being able to have video content and being able to put that on the website or host it somewhere else and make it a part of your website, bringing people back to your domain, to your identity, is really important.
Yeah, the ever-moving landscape of what content even means, where content is posted. Is it text content, audio, video content? Yeah, I guess I'll throw it to you, Maddie, and you can tell us a little bit about SEO and how that ties into some of the content and then I'm sure I'll have some follow-up questions. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the SEO agreements and how you handle looking through SEO things on a monthly or yearly basis or anything like that?
Totally. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting how the word content has changed. Like we kind of used to think of it as like blogs, but it's like it's everything that you consume. I'll add on a couple other ideas for like content maintenance in general, and then we can talk about like SEO offerings that could complement those things. So like a couple of things that we do for clients. A big one recently has been article rewrites. So something that somebody's published and maybe they've collected statistics from 2020 and now it's 2022. And if you're in a market that moves fast, like digital marketing, like e-commerce, something like that. I was actually listening to a podcast the other day. Mark Schaefer was on like Marketing Profs, their Marketing Smarts podcast. And he was saying how really like pretty much all the statistics about human behavior from before the pandemic are now out of date because of things people are like making decisions on where to send their kids to school based on like, are they going to get an in-person education or is it going to be a Zoom education? So just like little things like that would have never been a consideration in the past, but it's just interesting to think about now, especially in the context of keeping things up to date, because now it's all out of date pretty much. Other things that we do on an ongoing basis for clients that do some sort of retainer agreement with us are things like maybe they need press releases. They have a lot of products they're developing, and so they need regular access to a writer who can help them communicate that. It's things like email nurture sequences. It's things like possibly creating landing page copy, possibly creating social media copy. We've been doing a lot of like ebooks lately. So the core thing we do is blog content, but it leads into all these other things depending on the nature of the topics and the audience that they want to reach. So those are all different ways you could expand like a content operation. And another thing I will say is that we do partner with web development agencies, because it's been at least my experience that most of them like don't want to do it at all. Like the content is just like, they're like, we just don't want to touch it. So I think in addition to considering offering that as your service, you might even be able to find a great partnership where you both benefit, and maybe there's like a referral relationship where you get a cut of the deal. And so that's one way that you can sort of like delight your customers, but not have to do work that you don't have like a process for, that you don't have the writers on staff for, that you don't have to train people for. So just something to think about. In terms of like a web developer adding on some different SEO offerings, I think probably the most obvious one is to help with technical SEO and like auditing a website for any plugins that are breaking, any security issues, any broken links, indexing issues, any broken images, any alt text issues, all that sort of the on page and then like the website structure things, speed, performance, mobile optimization, does it have an SSL certificate installed? All of these things you can do when making a new website to set your client up for success, so that they know it's going to be technically sound and like they won't have any indexing issues because of those things like not being present. And then another thing, I guess this is something that it really depends on the personality and the team of the web developer offering these services, but also backlink outreach and getting backlink placements for clients is something that you could consider offering if you want to have that like full service offering: the web development, the technical SEO, the backlinks, and the content. To me, I see SEO as having like 3 pillars. It's content, backlinks, technical. There's more nuance to it, but yeah, if you want to offer them the full package, that's what I see it as. And I think a lot of those things you can do in-house, but you can't be good at everything, right? Like you might want to consider partnering with others too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Topher and Michelle, are those services that you all offer? Do you have partnerships for those types of things for SEO and content?
We do offer it at Thrive, and then I work with a company called Outlook Studios for doing SEO and PPC stuff.
We have an SEO person on the dev team to make sure the stuff we build is SEO compliant.
Nice.
But as I mentioned earlier, typically after that, we don't do a whole lot of maintenance packages. And so then it's up to the company to do their own SEO, hire somebody, have somebody on staff, whatever. And as often as not, they do have somebody on staff. We work with very large companies, and
Right.
they have people to take care of stuff like that.
Stepping back to the conversation about podcasts, audio, video things, Maddie, how do you, I guess, leverage some of that and still get the SEO benefits within the site?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely different ways that you can repurpose content, and it doesn't have to be a heavy lift. Like, for example, I have a plugin or like a tool that I use on the Blogsmith that translates the text of a post into an audio clip, and like it's not perfect, like it's like a robot, so I don't know how much people use it, how much they like it, but if they prefer to consume the content that way, and it's like easier for them to do that while they do something else. I know I listen to audiobooks when I'm walking the dog or doing the dishes or whatever. So there's stuff like that. There's stuff like, another tool I really like is Lumen 5, Lumen 5. And it basically uses AI to translate your text into like a video, like different frames. You can customize the imagery, you can customize the specific text, but it like does the initial heavy lift of that. And then, if you do a video, you could turn that into a blog post, edit it, format it, maybe add some custom graphics. A lot of what we do at the Blogsmith to try to make content more engaging, because it really is more than the written word, is to do like custom branded images, whether that's like infographics, or if we're featuring experts, like having like a nice branded like headshot with their title, and it's like the little things. So I don't think that adding like multimedia has to be a heavy lift. I think anything that you do adds value, and you just have to figure out what your audience likes, basically.
Yeah.
There's some really great AI transcribers now too, where if you have the video or the podcast that you've done, you can create a post out of that, and then you get the SEO benefits.
Exactly. Well. It's an easy lift to at least just get it started, right?
Yeah, we had some of that at the agency that I worked at as well, and it was always like, let's do this thing and figure out how many different ways that we can repurpose that for different parts. So if we would shoot a video, we'd make sure that we transcribed it so there was content on the site, and then some of that got snipped into little pieces that went on social media in different places. We were a small agency of 5, so it was all about repurposing as much of that stuff easily as we could, because we didn't have 20, 30 people to do all of that separately and recreate all of those pieces. So it was, let's take this one piece and see how many things we can do with it.
100%.
For just about all of these so far, we've talked about how maybe you take and offer these services after you've built a website for somebody. Are any of these, I guess for each of you individually, you can tell me your experience. Are these like phase 2 things that you do the website first and then you add them in? Are they things you do during building a website? Do you offer any of these services? I know the answer for some of you. Do you offer any of these services without having built the website? I guess where do you figure out where your business opportunity is there? Do you have to build the website first, or can you offer these services as standalones?
At Camber, the first thing we do with every client is, I can't think of the word. It's a deep dive on their project, basically. And it can take a month, and it's thousands of dollars. But at the end, we know everything. We have all the answers, and we can tell them what they're going to need and how much it's going to cost and all that. And the thing they get at the end of that discovery is a product. It's an attractive report, and they could theoretically take it to any other agency and just hand it to them and say, here, this is what we want. Here are all the answers to all the questions. So it's not like they just give us thousands of dollars and we say, yeah, we'll do it. You know, they get a lot of value from it. We don't typically offer services like that to sites that we aren't building. So it's tied up in the build. But boy, I can't tell you how nice it is to go into a project having all the answers, to know
For sure.
how long exactly what we're building and how long it's going to take and what every single element is going to look like.
Yeah.
All that stuff. It's beautiful. Very worth it.
Michelle, how about you?
At Thrive, we do both. We give the option of hosting and maintenance after all of our builds, and then also any new clients that come in. We have some that have together services with digital marketing products and hosting maintenance, and then we have some that we just either host and or do maintenance on their sites. With my company 13 Core, I'm actually more transitioning into doing more of just the hosting and or maintenance items, and doing more of third party for building. Just because I've learned I like more fixing things than building things.
Fair.
How about you, Alicia and Maddie? I would assume that content and SEO is both something that's easier done afterwards than maybe some other things, but also probably has quite the benefit to being involved in the process a bit earlier as well.
You want to go first, Alicia?
I'm happy with either way. Like I will get involved early on, and it gives you a little bit more control, and it's a little more creative. But you know, taking on something else that's already been built, it's a different kind of challenge.
Yeah, I would say that like most clients are coming to us with an established web presence. It tends to be a bigger brand that understands the value of content, has the budget for it. We work with very few small businesses at this point, just because I feel like in order for content marketing to be effective, you have to have a good like consistency and to some extent like quantity. You know, again, with like those different pieces, it's not just the blogs, it's like the emails you send people, it's like the web pages that you create. That being said, we do some like web page copy for new builds. And again, typically we're partnering with a web design agency or something like that. So we're a very specialized team. Like we only do content. I used to do websites. So then I decided like I'm going to grow my business so much faster by just focusing on one thing and having good like process strategy around that. But I will say it is helpful to be involved in those early design decisions. And like one part of our web page copywriting process that's different than our blog copywriting process is we typically do an outline, but the outline we do for web page copy it's more of a wireframe, like put the heading here, you know, here's a good feature area, you know, there should be an image here and stuff like that. And so it's obviously harder to kind of fit things in around an existing design than to like co-create with a partner that really gets the design and we really get the copy, and we can just like create it together kind of like in tandem. Like I don't know if one of those should come first. It's really like it should be collaborative.
Yeah. When thinking about, we talked a lot about the different things to do for maintenance agreements, or for, you know, additional services and stuff, service agreements. I'll throw it to everyone. What sort of advice or thoughts do you have around how people should determine whether or not they, as a freelancer agency, should do those things themselves or should look for partners to be able to offer some of these things to their clients?
I think it comes from a good, solid conversation. And I think as a developer or whatever it is you do, you need to rely on your gut as you're listening to the answers. When somebody says, sure, I can do that, like, really? This is what it involves. It's going to take this much time every month. And if you get it wrong, these are the consequences. Do you want that? And I've had people say, you know what, I probably could do that, but I don't want to risk those consequences, so I'm going to pay somebody else to do it. I've had people fall in love with it and say, yeah, this is great. I love doing this, you know? And then they move on to a new career.
Telling.
Tell me it hasn't happened. Somebody falls in love with web development because they need to set up their own website. Yeah. Yeah, but I think it is definitely a deep conversation, and you need to trust yourself, and they need to rely on you as the professional, the expert, to help them make that decision.
Some of the stuff too that we've suggested, you know, it might not be your wheelhouse, and you know, I think you need to be honest with yourself about, is it something you want to do, right? There's a lot of things maybe you can do, maybe you can even do them well. I don't know if you've heard of the Japanese concept of ikigai, but it's like where you cross over with your passion, your mission, your profession, that kind of thing. Like, what are you good at? What can you make money at? You know, what do you like to do? If you check all those boxes, then you should definitely offer it, and you should, you know, put some effort into finding out and making a proposal on what you could do for the client. But if it's not something you want to do, absolutely find somebody whose passion that is, partner with them, and maybe they can send you some work and you send them some work, and you know, that kind of networking aspect can be really great for your career as well.
Definitely.
I've learned mostly by error and then some trials that it's really easy to figure out what you don't want to do, or what you don't really excel at, and then find those type of people who have those passions, just like how Alicia said. Like for me, I found out that while I can build sites and do the front end development, I don't want to. And on a project manager standpoint, I don't mind on that front, but like you always end up with those clients, I want the background purple, and then you make it purple. Oh, that's too purple. And then you're just like, we've all had those
less
type of
purple
clients.
than that. Okay.
That's like how I found out I don't want to do social media, like that kind of thing. I don't like this one little thing for every post.
When you go to like word camps or something like that, and you meet people who like, Maddie absolutely love doing SEO, and so then you're like, hey, let's be friends.
I would say it might surprise the audience to know that like a lot of the clients we work with are established content teams. Like they have the capabilities to do this on staff, but what they need is the quantity. What they need is like the time and the resources, and knowing that they can trust that it's all going to be done. Because I think there is a difference in some cases, at least in content writing, working with like a freelancer versus an agency. It's like we do the SEO keyword research. We have an editor, you know, who's going to go over what the writer creates. We have a graphic design agency we work with. We have project managers. We will manage the entire project. And so I think what it comes down to in terms of like, should you partner, should you offer it? It also comes down to just like, what do you have the resources for? What do you have the time to do? And kind of what everybody else I think has said is like, what is your like visceral reaction to you doing that work? Does it like energize you, or does it drain you? And if it drains you, then you should find a partner, because there are people who really enjoy that work.
You guys partner with folks. I'm going to ask a question now, Marcus.
Go for it.
Do you guys
Absolutely.
do like fractional talent where you're managing the client, but on the back end, you're outsourcing, subcontracting somebody? Or do you like send them and say like, this is not what we do? You know, does it depend, I guess? What do you guys prefer?
I do both. It really depends on the client. Some of the clients are like, I just want to come to you and you do everything.
Yeah, lots.
And then I'll outsource. And then there's some that like really want to be involved in the processes and stuff. And then I am like, well, I work or collaborate with this person or this company. Here we can all meet.
About it too from the Sakuri side, like we have our agency plan where, you know, that web professionals working with the client, but on the back end, they're setting up tickets with Sakuri versus being like, hey, go buy Sakuri and deal with them. Set your own ticket up, type of thing.
Yeah, I think for me, it depends. What I will say is we do set expectations with clients that are working through like another agency we're partnering with. And because we have had issues in the past where it's like one of those people, the client or the agency, will be like the roadblock to getting something approved. And then the client will be like, why isn't this done? And it's like, well, we're waiting on, your contact. So we have set expectations with clients now that like we ultimately defer to the person who pays the bills, and that's the approval we seek. I'm going to mute myself.
Yep.
Awesome. We do have another question in the chat. Shannon, I hope I said that right, asks for those doing copywriting when blog content is very specialized, like law or finance. Do you write the copy? And if so, how do you go about, researching the topics, figuring out what to write, and how to write it and all of that in a way that's going to be accurate as well as well written?
It's always good to have a lawyer look over stuff if it's, if it's something where you feel like there's a risk at all, and it depends on your industry. I think, doing a lot of research and making sure that you're taking into account any of the, specifics in terms of terminology. I'm not sure about for finance, but I know certainly from a legal standpoint, if you can have a subject matter expert to technical review what you're doing or to legally review what you're doing, what you put out before you publish it, that's advisable for sure.
Pretty much the same thing. Ideally, the client has a contact that we can have, conversations with and do interviews with for that purpose. If they don't, I think that's grounds for saying it's going to be a more expensive product because I'm going to have to source that person. It's using tools like Haro, help a reporter out, to find experts who aren't in your network. I think it's also important to do some research, like going into those conversations. And we use tools like Phrase, which is, it's a content optimization tool, but it's also like an article briefing tool. And so it kind of like gives you a nice, easy list of resources that you could start that search with and like popular topics, questions that people have. So do a little research, go into an interview, and then have a subject matter expert clear any like, weird language or concepts that you're not sure about, just to make sure that like it's compliant with that industry.
Yeah, that or do you have the client write it and edit it? And I think that's part of it too, right? Is you are able to write it, and if they, assuming you're writing it for a law or finance company, they should obviously have folks within that can proofread that and make sure it's accurate. The way that we did it was we would have them provide an outline to us, and then we would write based on that outline and then submit it back and let them review it for accuracy and all of that.
That's a great way to do it.
We only have a few minutes left, and so I wanted to just quickly see if each of you could give us like a productivity tool that you use daily for these sorts of service agreements that you think maybe are the people watching should know about. No particular order. Whoever comes up with one first gets to go first.
To make the agreements or the tools we use for the support.
Either one.
Well, I'll start. I have an idea. So to like execute the work and keep that productive, I use a tool called Process Street, and it allows me to build out all these different workflows. So we have this one for like our blog and like content production in general. It at its longest, it's like 120 steps long, but it adjusts based on, are we doing keyword research? Are we going to upload the content to WordPress for them? Is it this type of article or that type of article or this type of content? So it adjusts dynamically based on conditional logic. And then we can do, based on the workflow, we can do like checklists for each piece of content. And so using that tool has been really awesome, partially because it connects to things like Zapier, has other automations. But it's like one of the most brilliant no-code tools that I've used, and customers seem to like it too because we can share like progress. We've made like a little client progress dashboard based on the data that's in there, but in like a streamlined version. So check it out.
Cool.
Like, I haven't used it personally, but I've heard so much about monster contracts for this kind of stuff that I feel like it's worth mentioning for anybody who might not be aware. But yeah, just great contracts for specifically designed for freelancers and web agencies and stuff to use with clients.
No matter which flavor you like, have some kind of documentation process, be it just Google Drive and you just keep a doc for each client and then put like your date, what you did, or as much as like having teamwork or Write or something like that, but always document everything you do, when you do it, why you did it, where you did it.
Yeah, I'm going to second that. Mine is pretty tedious from a tool standpoint. You can use anything. But I mentioned we had the one client that we did the SSH WPCLI stuff for. Every month, I wrote up a report in Google Docs and exported it as a PDF, and it had our header on it, and it was attractive, and it was, it was a product we were delivering. And you can build that in anything, any word processor, any CRM, whatever you want to do. So it's more about the product that we're delivering than the tool we're using.
Yeah, for things like that, we would use Basecamp and do similar things, right? We would generate that same report like you talked about, like a PDF, and then use Basecamp to deliver that. And a lot of the back and forth between our clients, so there was always a paper trail of who made what decision, when it was made, why it was made, and that way, if we ever have any questions about any of it, we can go back to those streams of conversations and say, well, we made that decision here because of this reason, and that's why we went in this direction, and then here are the stats to support all of that. So there are lots of other project management softwares similar, but that was the one that we used when I was working at the agency before. I know that a couple of us have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so I will probably go ahead and wrap us up here. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I just want to let you know that next week, same place, same time, we have another GoDaddy Pro meetup talking about earning more with your it's titled Earn More with Your Website Creation Business, but our friends from Weglot will be joining to talk about how adding translation services to your offerings may help with just having another offering, just another revenue stream. And like I said before, that's next week, same place, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern. To register for that or any other future events, or check on some of our past events, go to events.godaddy.com or catch any of the event replays on our GoDaddy Pro YouTube channel. And that's it for us. Thank you, Michelle, Topher, Alicia, and Maddie for joining me today. I enjoyed having you on.
Joined being here.
Very happy to be here.
Very happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us here in the chat, and we will see you all next time.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.